All right. So if everyone could get out their smart devices, who here does not have a smartphone? That's what I thought. You do too. So if everyone could get out their smartphones and scan the QR code here on the screen, we're going to do an activity, an animal welfare activity to see how sharp your skills are. And so our next speaker is Amelia Woods, and I will let her take the floor.
Let me see. Yep. Okay, that is working. Okay, so we'll scan the devices. Looks like everybody. So you don't actually have to put you don't have to put your name in the next screen. It's all anonymous, so don't worry. I'm not going to count this for your PACO certification or anything like that. All right. Okay, so I'm going to quickly talk about poultry welfare auditing, where we came from, what we do, and how we do it. And the how we do it part is what we're going to try to be interactive with, and I look forward to engaging with you guys. So just to kick us off, can you tell me what your current position is? I'd like to kind of get a gauge of the audience and the room. That one? Everybody's got it except Dr. Warmer. Yes. Yeah. You good? Okay. All right. So is everybody? Oh, look, 47 responses. Where did my, can I stop sharing for a minute? Because it's not showing the responses. 51. So it's not showing me the, that's me.
Where is it supposed to come up? Supposed to pull everywhere.
Yeah.
It's supposed to show up.
Oh, right there. I'll just do it backwards. Okay, we'll see if this works. Is it right on the Zoom?
But you gotta reshare your screen.
Oh, reshare. Okay. I'm sorry, guys.
And share PowerPoint. You have two different ones.
Is that right? Okay, so a lot of academics. Okay, I kind of figured that's great. I had a teacher one time say that by definition, technology was supposed to improve life. I'm not sure this improves my life. You give me a refrigerator, yes, that improves my life. This, I'm not sure. It's really cool when it works. It's really annoying when it doesn't. Did I totally break it?
I don't know.
Okay.
This side.
Wait, come fix it. Okay. Is it working now? So the next question, what does animal welfare mean to you? One word, or if you want to use two words, put a hyphen between it. And ethical. Okay, that's great. It's going to show up there. It's going to... Husbandry. That's a good one. Respect. I like that. The more times that we put in the same word, it will make it bigger. So This is a great group. They know what it means. A good life. I like that. Yeah. So let's just briefly talk about the history of animal welfare. And when you start digging into the history, when we talk in the United States, we may think back to the early 2000s and say, oh, this is a relatively new science, a relatively new field. But really, we can date back the idea of an animal having a good life, or the idea of taking care of animals, all the way back to Aristotle in around 342 BC, and how he taught Alexander the Great, and he returned to Athens and taught zoology. So I got down a super long rabbit trail about the history of animal welfare, which was very fascinating. If anybody would like to just start Googling things, it would be really cool. But we see the first legislation of animal welfare in Ireland in 1635, and that legislation was pulling wool off of live sheep. And so they banned that all the way back in 1635. The first animal welfare organization was RSPCA in 1824. We might know the RSPCA, and then it transitioned in, it was kind of the front runner to the American Humane in some of the work they've done with advocating for human fountains in big cities. And when you start looking at what American Humane did back in the early and mid 1800s, they actually put in child welfare with animal welfare. And so that's really fascinating too, the evolution of that. One that I thought was quite fascinating is in 1916, the U.S. Secretary of War invited the American Humane to rescue World War I wounded horses over in Europe. So they were called in to answer that call to take care of the horses. And then you've got the Humane Slaughter Act. And then we've got in 1964, Ruth Harrison releases the book Animal Machines, which if you don't know what that is, I would say look it up. It's really the foundation of some of the current thinkings in animal welfare. In 1979, the 5 freedoms were formalized and released. And then in the 1990s, the formal auditing of meat plant and processing plants began with the help of Dr. Temple Grandin, kind of the grandmother of modern day animal welfare, maybe. She's a fascinating individual. In the 1990s, we see the release of the new model of the 5 freedoms, the 5 domains. And then, hey, 2000s, the PACO was formed, and we'll talk a little bit about PACO. And also in the early 2000s, we saw farm and production facilities beginning the assessment programs. And then in the 2010s, we really see that auditing on farm and production facilities really escalate, which leads me to, where does PACO fit in that long line of history? Well, our vision is to be the trusted authority on animal welfare auditing with our mission of promoting animal welfare through auditor training and audit certification. And we believe that we are the standard of excellence in animal welfare auditing. Our core values are integrity, credibility, collaboration, expertise, and one of the really important ones is science-based. We know that we're already working in a very emotionally driven area, so we want to make sure we've got the science, we've got the research and the resources to back up our claims. So how do we uphold our core values? So the PACO member organizations are a long list of academic and professional associations representing all the major categories of protein animal production. For this audience today, the Poultry Science Association and the avian pathologists, those are our 2 poultry associations, and each one of these associations provide us with 2 PACO board members. The PSA, our chairman right now is actually the PSA representative, Dr. Karen Christensen from Tyson. So we're led by a very upstanding poultry individual right now. So great organization, great board of directors that really help us uphold the values and put them into place. So PACO's two roles as we promote animal welfare through auditor training and audit certification. So we provide training and certification of animal welfare auditors. Who in here has attended a PACO animal auditor training? Awesome. Okay, good. Anybody else? We've got one in November plugged for broiler specific. So, and then we also certify animal welfare audits. So right now we have over 1,000 certified auditors broken down into our 5 species categories and our 6 certifications. The only species that has kind of a broke off certification is us poultry people. We have a broiler welfare auditor training for specifically for our broiler folks. Canada provides almost over 400 auditors, so we are an internationally based organization. Our last trainings this year, we were able to accumulate attendees from 13 countries, which was quite fascinating to be on a call with our experts in Australia and New Zealand, Mexico, Brazil, and all over Canada. You might recognize some of these companies or some of these organizations. They have certified audits with us in each one of our areas. Meat plant, dairy, swine, broiler production, turkey, cattle feedlot, and others. So we actually, the Animal Kind and the Fur Commission have certified PACO audits. So, okay, so that's enough about PACO. So back to auditing and animal welfare. It is actually a scientific area, right? It's not just a job or just a position, even though we've got folks in this room that might have animal welfare in their title. It's actually a study. Ethology, the scientific and objective study of animal behavior. Dr. Weimer proclaims to be one and is one, not just proclaims. And with that background, the scientific, we really quantify animal welfare using animal behavior, psychology, neuroscience, veterinary medicine, all the G's. We put them together to really give us a background to be able to evaluate and identify key welfare indicators for animal welfare and animal welfare auditing. So we don't just dream it up. These organizations are really backed with science and with the study. So what does all that history mean to auditing? So we've probably all either heard of the 5 freedoms or the 5 domains. So those are really the 2 important frameworks on which animal welfare auditing is assessed, right? Or either your organization or your company might adapt the 5 freedoms, or they might adapt the 5 domains. They're really a lot of the similarities. They're just broken down a little differently. So, but whichever one that your company or your organization incorporates, we want to use those 5 freedoms or those 5 domains in auditing. So we've got our five high level categories, frameworks, and then we want to be able to measure and manage concerns, which translate into an audit for us. So we take the 5 freedoms or the 5 domains, we give it manageable and measurable criteria, and that's how we develop our audits. So within animal science incorporates 3 perspectives, which with either one of the frameworks, you're going to have your 3 perspectives that you're going to want to answer when you're evaluating animal welfare. So we've got, the body, the mind, and the nature. We've got the biological function, the active state, or their feelings, and then the natures of the highly motivated behavior. And so when all 3 of those come together within your auditing program, that's where we see welfare really thrive. So for an example, let's look at foot pad dermatitis in broiler birds. We've got the scale there of a perfect paw versus a burnt paw. So we can take this one measurable outcome, right? Foot pad dermatitis, and we can attribute and we can answer the questions for the body, the biological function. We know that disease and injury fit into this category, so that would be. We can definitely all agree that the paw over here is definitely an injured paw or could be uncomfortable, right? And for the nature, we know that chickens are motivated to move around and seek food. Well, when their body is not working properly or their feet hurt, they're probably not going to experience or exhibit those natural behaviors. We know that tissue damage is painful, right? So we're talking about the affective state and the feelings in the mind, and some of the conversation earlier this morning that was great. Kind of gives us that affective states and the idea. So by looking at just one simple key welfare indicator of foot pad dermatitis, we can potentially really build an audit and build a criteria and a measurable standard around that. Animal welfare is so much more than health and productivity. When we have our basics of health and access to resources and the interaction and the appropriate, euthanasia or slaughter techniques, when we have all those in place, that, and then we can then experience that next level of the ability to perform those natural or highly motivated behaviors. So when a bird doesn't have burnt paws, we're going to see it move around a lot more. We're going to see it eat and drink and interact on a much more engaging manner. So when we talk about auditing and we talk about how does all this come together, when PACO specifically, when we go to certify an audit or when we're talking and training our auditors, we have three, we call it the tripod, right? So we're going to have animal-based measures, protocol-based measures, and resource or facility-based measures, which all play back into each one of the 5 freedoms or the 5 domains. With our animal-based measures, that's how those animals respond. How are they doing in the system or the operation that they're currently in? Those protocol-based measures, we've got the animal care systems in place. So your SOP and your documentation. And then for resource or facility-based measures, animal care inputs provided to the animal and just the physical facility that the animal is being raised in. So when we incorporate the scientific evidence into the audit design in our 3 measures, so back to our paw score or our foot pad dermatitis, when we've got our animal-based measures, really easy would be just scoring the paws. And we know we do that at the plant after the paw has been removed from the bird, and we can evaluate that score and contribute it back to the farm or the grow-out facility. For our facility-based measures, we've got our litter quality. We're trained to be able to take litter samples throughout the house during an audit. For our protocol-based measures, it might look something like litter management SOP, or maybe a ventilation SOP or ventilation management. All those things will play in to the outcome of a healthy paw or an injured paw. So I don't know about you guys, but 2020 changed a whole lot of stuff. And one way that besides, we're masking and we're vaccinating and we're being cautious of all kinds of things, and toilet paper is apparently off the shelves, right? We also saw such changes in animal welfare and how we audit, because when an auditor can't visit a facility, or we can't train and instruct new auditors, we had to shift virtually as well as the rest of the world. So, we shifted virtually at PACO. We still actually have not went back to in-person poultry training yet. And this week, actually today, is our first meat plant training in person in Nebraska for the first time since 2019. So we're finally getting back in person, right? But we had to quickly figure out a way to train auditors across the board on an international scale on the computer. And there's just something about not standing in a chicken house talking about litter. We had to figure out a way to virtually deliver that material. We saw audits shifted virtually, so visitors couldn't come to facilities. We had to record and send it in and talk back and forth. But in those kind of aggravating things, we also saw some great positives. We saw increase in international presence. Like I said, we were able to train auditors to be PACO certified in 13 countries. We were able to train, all over across Australia and China. We even had some Thailand individuals, and that was really great to be able to globally train people at the same standards for the same purpose in the same outcome. And we're also able to engage across the table. So instead of, previously where someone that would attend our training is only interested in becoming a third-party auditor, July was a perfect example of being on the computer with a lot of industry-minded individuals. And we're really being able to train not only our third-party auditors, which is very important. We've got to have those. We're also being able to train our academic and our industry partners. So we're all hearing the same message. We're hearing the same material, and we're able to audit the same exact way. So I talk about how cool it was to transition virtually, but let's try it out and let's see if we break the Zoom again. So we're gonna start in the hatchery, and I realize that I have not given you an audit tool. I have not given you any auditor training, but we're gonna evaluate some key areas in a broiler specific operation. So for this first question, you should be able to just click on an area, select areas where you might inspect a chick drop height. And so I will have a disclaimer. All 12 inches, right, is our standard chick drop height allowance. So there we go. Great. I'm going to turn around here. And so this is one of the ways that we were able to engage with our virtual audience and really allow them to answer questions. And I'm seeing some awesome areas. I love the ones down here with the boxes. You can actually see that they have they've helped that, right? So they've raised their boxes up. So that might be a great call out if you're conducting an audit. I'm not sure what chick would be falling from above the door there, but that's definitely more than 12 inches. The ceiling fan, wow, okay. Awesome. Maybe we need to talk about any hatchery specialists in here. Like maybe that might help your livability if you don't drop them from the ceiling fan. All right, I think that's enough of that. So, okay, so let's look at some gate score, right? This is one of the areas that a lot of auditors spend a lot of time learning and assessing and calibrating. It's very important that we get this right. So with 0, 1, 2, of course, 0 is no signs of lameness. 1 is awkward or uneven steps. 2 can't walk without sitting down or obvious lameness, right? So I gave you a little reminder of what gait is like. So, all right, I'm going to hit play. I'm going to activate the poll, and then we're going to come back to the video, okay? There we go. Okay. So, is there a trick to make it work? Oh, there we go. Okay, so evaluate that you should have on your poll everywhere, score this gate. So what do you think this bird right here? Is he a 0, 1, or is she a 0, 1, or a 2? I know that's a good looking chicken right there. Okay, let's see. Okay, so we've got some variation. So we've got some zeros, some 1s, and some 2s. I grade it a 0. I don't think that bird has any wobble. It's got a good get up and go. And so this is a great another area where we can really train auditors and we can have some intense conversation about gate scoring. And we know that when you're in a house, you can really evaluate on a much closer view, and you can see that bird coming and going. But this is a great way to show. Okay, let me activate the poll, and then let's go back. There we go. Okay, score this gate. Very good. I would agree with 90% of the room. This is a gate score 2. That bird could obviously not get up and go without being encouraged, and so very good. Okay. Select areas of the module that you might consider damaged. Everybody see that picture? It should come up on your device as well, but. Remember that module scoring is done at the facility in most assessments. We want to make sure that the bird the module is it showing? No. Oh, no. We're good now. Okay. There we go. We will make sure that the wires are not protruding in as to injure the bird, or there's not a hole or a gap big enough for the bird to escape. We don't want to be Hansel and Gretel on the way from the farm to the plant, leaving chickens the whole way. So very good. Also, another great area where we can gauge our virtual instruction, and if individuals are getting our material. Oh, wow. Okay. Is this wing pass or fail? Is this a broken wing or a not broken wing? Yeah, so I'm going to agree with 92% of you guys. This is a pass. Even though that wing is hanging down, we don't see any breakage, and we don't see that direct drop of that wing. What about this wing? Yeah. 98% of you guys can be auditors. I don't know about the other 2%. So we definitely have a straight drop of the wing. We can even see some blood, and this is, of course, post knife, right? So we're already going to have that we're going to have some blood, but we see that straight drop, and that's definitely a broken wing where we would evaluate for that plant. Okay, how about this wing or these wings? See, I hid it from you guys this time, so you can't see what your peers are saying. Okay, so that would pass as well, right? There's no breakage, and for 40 of us, we said it right, and it's not showing the responses again. So cool. So yeah, that's definitely a pass. Okay, so let's move on to leg bruising, right? We're gonna evaluate this post picker at the plant. So does this leg pass or fail? Are we 50-50? Okay, who's going to fight about it? Okay, so we're definitely looking for bruises larger than a quarter on that drum, right? We want to inspect the entire leg. Does this have a, it doesn't work on the TV. Okay, so up here on the inside, I see a bruise. And then on the other leg up towards the hock, I see a bruise as well. So I'm going to evaluate this as a bruise or as a fail. Because it's either the size of a quarter or if two bruises equal the size of a quarter, right? So I would count that, and I would not fight with my auditor if that was counted against me. Okay, what about this bruise? I love it when we have a close race. I specifically chose this image. This is one of our great teaching images because we do see a bruise up there on that leg. I don't see anything on the other leg. So I'm going to say this leg passes. I do not think that bruise. Yeah, Dr. Owens got it. All right. I do not think that bruise is the size of a quarter or larger. And I don't see any other bruises on either other legs. And what you guys are seeing maybe is coming down from that bruise. But if you look at that image closer, that's not a bruise. It's more of pigmentation. So I'm going to say that leg passes. Okay, what about this one? Very good. I'm going to say this leg passes, and I'm going to instruct and teach that this leg passes. I see no bruise on the outside, and of course I can't make out what's on the inside of that leg. And I think it is mindful that we have to be able to evaluate these very, very quickly. We're evaluating usually a 500 bird count, right? If you're in the States using the National Chicken Council guidelines. And these birds could be running as fast as 110 birds a minute past you. So you've got to be able to evaluate and count these bruises or count these broken wings very, very quickly. And you can't second guess yourselves, right? You've got to be familiar with these key welfare indicators and be able to identify, because the last thing you want to do is be like, oh, I don't know. And then you can't see the bird again, right? It's gone. So we want to make sure that we're familiar with what evaluates a wing breakage, a leg bruise, and things like that. You don't want to be digging in your pocket looking for a quarter for every bird, right? So, okay, let's look at some paws. Which, me personally, this is one that I have to take a lot of time. This is one that's going to be evaluated usually in the office after you conduct your audit in the plant. It's going to be after those pickers and after it's removed from the bird. So remember that it's going to be, the size of, it's going to be less than the fullness of the pad, and we're going to also combine any that's on the toes. So I agree with 77% of you guys that this paw passes. And remember, I think it's very important that we call out that this is not grading in the plant. This is not for sale paws. This is a welfare indicator. And so the plant or an individual might disagree with you if they're in the mindset of economics, right? If they're in the mindset of, oh, I can't sell that paw. That's not what we're evaluating here. We're evaluating strictly a welfare indicator. Okay, how about this? How about this poor paw? It's definitely taking up the majority of that pad. And I've got a picture of two paws here, right? And that would count as two, right? You don't count that as one, even though it's the same bird, that would count as two. So make sure you just know your tool, know the criteria you're evaluating to, and practice and study and do all the fun things. Okay, how about this paw? It's a pass. Okay, 100% of you guys can be auditors. Okay, so real quick, I'd like to just thank the PACO sponsors. So each one of these are our 2022 training sponsors. These guys make it possible for us to be able to invest in really awesome tools like the Poll Everywhere, and let Dakota and I travel and get these awesome pictures and footages. Some of them even allow us to come to their facilities and give us full access to have cameras and things. And that's what it really means to audit and to train auditors in 2022, is really just bridging that gap and having that full industry conversation. So these are our sustaining sponsors, partners this year. We added Cargill, which is a great ally, along with some other great companies that represent all the species areas that we represent. So with that, there we go. There's animal welfare auditing really quick. Are there any questions? Am I supposed to take questions this time? Or
Hey, thank you for your talk. It was really interesting to see. My question was about some of the measurements. You gave an example around the footbed dermatitis and litter. Some of these basically measure the same thing, right? They're just taking different approaches. So
correct.
either measure on the animal,
Right.
or on the protocol, or on the facility.
So each assessment is going to have those criteria. Foot pad dermatitis is just a real easy one to give an example, but each audit is going to be asked to evaluate anything from the litter to the ventilation, to the feed, to the water, to the bird handling. Depends on the different section of the supply chain, what we audit differently. But yeah, there's going to be an abundance of different criteria.
Yeah, so what I was wondering is, have you considered, I don't know to what extent PACO has any influence on that, but considered selecting criteria to maybe reduce the time required to perform an audit, like for the footbed dermatitis example,
Yeah.
You could just look at footbed dermatitis and infer litter quality and management.
Yep. So that's a great question, and that's a great call out too, is when we sit, so PACO is considered the unbiased. We sit on the panel and we help navigate auditor or audit assessments, right? And that's one of the things we want to eliminate as much time we're either handling or practicing or in the house with the animal, whether it be a cow in transport or a broiler bird. So we're all the time evaluating how can we do this more effectively and efficiently with less movement or handling of the animal. Not everybody at once.
Hi, so I'm actually from California. I'm just going here for school. At my previous university, we worked with the California Humane Society.
Okay, yeah.
And I might not have remembered it, but this is like the first time like PACO has actually popped up.
Okay.
So I was just wondering if do you guys depending on the region, of course, do you guys work together or do you guys just sort of let the producer, I guess?
So yes, we're definitely across the entire US. We actually work closely with UC Davis in California, and Dr. Tucker, and they do a lot of dairy work in California. So yeah, anytime that somebody reaches out, we're always willing to have that conversation, wherever the location. I'm actually working with a group right now out of Australia, right? So wherever, we're always open to have that unbiased, scientific based conversation.
Gotcha. Thank you.
This is not really much of a question, but more of a comment. And I don't think I've mentioned this to you before, but Beth Rumley, works in the Ag Law Center here.
Yes.
She contacted me recently talking about the new update to the Prop 12.
Okay.
And that they're going to develop their own standards. The state of California will be. So maybe we should have some conversations
Okay,
with them.
maybe I'll tell Colette about that later. Yeah, we do stay very active with the we stay very engaged with what, I don't want to say active. It's not like we're in DC lobbying, right? But we do stay very engaged on what the propositions either in California or Massachusetts, whatever's happening on the entire animal welfare stage. So that's great.
So since COVID began, so I've had the opportunity to have with my company to have an external PACO auditor come in, and we've done it virtually.
Yep.
And that was its own challenge in and of itself. I was going out to all the facilities. I mean, I had thousands of photos and videos, but then we've also done it in person. And do you see that as something, or the virtual auditing, I suppose, something that PACO will continue maybe to somewhat lean into? Like, I know it was kind of something that was reactionary as a result of COVID, but I think, you know, it could potentially have benefits as far as expanding the reach of facilities we're able to get to. Do you see that something that PACO will lean into a little more and kind of refining that virtual auditing kind of process?
Great question. And for poultry specific, we know that it is such a challenge, whether it be COVID or AI, for auditors to visit facilities. And so we are trying to develop different formats and different training tools to help auditors stay calibrated, stay relevant to the changing audits or the changing welfare arena, right? But it really never beats being in the chicken house or being in the plant evaluating, right? And so just as we saw in 2020, we will adjust and we will, like I think Dr. Burbank saying this morning, the industry is very, we're flexible. That's the word you use, flexible. We're very flexible, and we will continue to be flexible, right? As long as we're providing the best animal welfare auditing and the best animal welfare outcomes. Is that interesting? Okay, cool.
Could you review again the species that you cover, and are you looking at other species?
Yes, ma'am.
to cover?
So we do, of course, poultry, and within poultry is going to be broiler breeder, turkey, layers, and ducks, which always gets exciting. And we do beef feedlot as well. We have on-farm beef feedlot certification, on-farm swine, which is going to cover sow and the babies, the piglets, and kind of that whole on-farm swine operation. Meat plant, which covers cattle and hog and sheep, and then some religious slaughter and some bison and some alternative proteins, right? And then dairy. We have dairy. That's 5, yes. We're actually looking into the field of aquaculture and how that's expanding and how that's growing, which opens up a whole nother realm of species and variations. And so those are our 5 core right now. And yes, ma'am, we are looking at different areas. So Colette jokes that's my boss, the executive director, that she wants me to do aquaculture because she wants me to do the feathers and the fins. And so we'll see about that. That opens up a large international audience as well. So.
All right, we have a couple of virtual questions here.
Okay.
Stay there too, because you're in this camp now.
Okay, sorry.
So Maya McCoggan would like to know, first she says, thanks for a great talk. In reference to the goal of grounding audits and science-based information, is PACO involved in activities to help bridge the gaps in knowledge? As we heard from this morning's speakers, there are still many things we don't know about welfare and measuring welfare.
That is a loaded question. Yes. So one way that we are trying to bridge the gap I'll answer that one first. Is PACO, within our certification, we require continuing education for our certified auditors. One way that we're helping with that on a virtual stage and trying to bridge the gap to a broader audience is our PACO monthly webinars, where we try to address anything that relates to welfare, whether it be biosecurity in right now in poultry, or legislation. Beth they talked about some of the different legislations, or whatever species, right? So we're trying to bridge that gap with these public free webinars that we can train from that scientific approach. We're also staying very engaged, and that's why our member organizations are so important, because they go to Poultry Science Association and they hear the concerns, and then Dr. Christensen and Dr. Anderson bring that to the PACO board, and we discuss ways that we can address some of the things that PSA or AMSA are hearing. So yeah, I think we try to stay, of course, in a unbiased position, but we also try to stay engaged and try to get it out, especially to the auditing community.
All right, we have another one here.
Okay.
Toughie.
Okay.
Buckle up. Ruth Newberry asks, how do you decide where to draw the line? Arguably, the standard for passing could be higher than your current criterion for foot pad dermatitis and bruising.
Okay, say that last part again.
Arguably, so how do you decide where to draw the line is the question. Arguably, the standard for passing could be higher than your current criterion for foot pad dermatitis and bruising, and probably others too.
Okay, great. So we train to the AAAP standards and guidelines. So the American Association of Avian Pathologists are the ones that release the guidelines for things like bruising on legs, wing breakage, paws, and even some hot burns and breast blisters, right? So that's going to be our standard that we're going to train to. If an organization or a company wants to go above and beyond that standard, recognized without the entire industry, that's totally their call. But we're going to we train to the industry recognized standards, which are always increasing, and they're always under review and things like that. So continuing improvement is always very, very important when it comes to welfare auditing. Yes.
I have a question. Just generally, do you find there's one species that PACO covers that's more difficult to audit compared to like broilers and meat, dairy, those types of?
For me personally, coming from a broiler breeder background, I think dairy auditing it's very hard, right? But for a dairy auditor, they sometimes think broiler auditing is hard, and especially the areas of like stunning and sensibility and things like that in the plant. So it really just depends on where your background is and where you're comfortable at. We've only got a few. I think at this time we've got 4 auditors in PACO that are certified in all 5 areas or all 5 species, and so it's not something we see of crossing a lot of species. We see a lot of folks with our poultry certification in our meat plant, but there's only a handful that actually cover all of them. So.
Any other questions for our speaker? I know we got some. Any students in my class want some more extra credit points?
Sorry.
Let's see. I heard it. I don't know if it was a slip or not, but did you say legislator? Is that like the combination of legislature and non-slaughtering animals?
I'm just
Legislature.
making sure you pay
We
attention.
can coin that term.
Legislation.
Yeah, I'll share it with you.
I don't know, sometimes my Southern translate to all kinds of different things for people from Iowa. So I don't know what you heard.
We elongate our vowels. So what's the future of PACO? So you talked about fins being an addition, talking about validating audit tools from other countries.
Mm-hmm.
What else? Pie in the sky. Where are you going?
So in December of 21, we actually sat down and I got to listen to our board of directors put together the strategic plan. And we're coming up on 25 years of PACO, which for me, that's not hard because that's a lot of my life. But for some of the folks that have really been engaged and been around, they're really excited to see where we started and where we are now and where we're going. So being part of that strategic planning was really exciting. International, that is a huge strategic objective for us. In just trying to not only be in Mexico and Brazil, which we're quite prominent in actually right now, branching over into Australia and possibly Asia. So, just broadening our international audience. Making sure that we're certifying and continuing to certify audits on a high standard. That's one of our strategic goals. In training auditors to the same level, right? We want to make sure that an auditor that went through our training in 2010 and an auditor that went through our training in 2020 are getting that same high level training. Another area, a strategic idea, strategic objective is really bridging that gap between the consumer and how do we get in front of audiences like this? How do we get in front of student organizations and really let them know that PACO exists for one thing, and why we exist and how to keep us existing, right? So those are some of the real fun things that's coming.
That's interesting about the 2010 training versus the 2020 training.
Yeah.
I mean, the foundation of what you're looking for is always the same, but the criteria might be different,
Yep.
what you look for.
Yeah.
So how do you make sure they're on the same playing field? Is it the continuing education credits or?
The continuing education credit is very, very important, right? But then we've really adapted in our training not to teach to a specific tool, rather teach to animal welfare, teach those key welfare indicators, and teach how to evaluate. How to evaluate a broken wing. A broken wing is going to be a broken wing in 2010 as it is in 2020, right? And so really just teaching good auditing foundations and then teaching them how to evaluate any tool they're given any day or night. If I'm given the Canadian Code of Practice for broiler birds or the National Chicken Council or a company specific audit, that's great. All I have to do is read it and know what criteria and know how to evaluate the certain criteria.
Thank you. Anyone else have any other questions? All right, let's thank Amelia.